Alright, so we've had two tournaments back, Nephilim and Triad Wars, and I just wanted to take a look at where I think people have moved a little in the all-time rankings, and specifically looking at Akiyama, because as a player with relatively few tournaments played and deep runs in both tournaments, I wanted to rethink where I had placed him before and see if he moved, and just take a quick look at some other people as well. But I gotta get the right thing so I can properly go to the next screen slide. So first, other players. Seto has a finals and a semis. Midas has another finals. He is now tied for most finals ever without winning a tournament. Piggy and Tezuka each got 2 icons. Deli and Turds each earned a semis. Does this move any of them? And I think the answer is mostly no. Like, maybe Midas makes a jump if I do a serious look at him again. Obviously these are good results for Piggy and Tezuka, but neither, net 4-2 isn't changing their overall win percentage much. 2 extra icons, but in shorter tournaments, I think they're solid results for both, right? But they don't move either kind of what echelon they're in tournament standings. Deli's made 1.5 million semis, Turds has made a fair number of semis. These are nice runs for both, but again, I don't think they move the needle. Seto has a better chance to be moved by this, as this is the best sequence of results of any of these players. But Seto's standards are so high, even that just seems like, oh, you did it for another 2 tournaments. Well done, right? And also, Seto and Deli are already just in that GOAT conversation and remain in the GOAT conversation, right? What you gonna do? I do think DJ, who I haven't mentioned yet, he made a semis and a quarters, 2 consecutive icons, including a semifinals. And I know quarters get the icon, but I'm really high on making semifinals. And I think this moves him from someone I didn't consider for the top 100 into someone who's probably in it whenever I redo it. And he's still competing, right? He still could run up other results, but just these 2 results again, consecutive semis and quarters, that's the best run of Homer's career, a player I've recently lauded, right? And that was with longer tournaments. There's reasons that this could be a little weaker, but it's a really strong run. Very few players have consecutive icons, including a semis. Turds also won Carver, but given the bracket being very weird, the only match being the finals against a tough opponent in Villalba, I think this more meant, because I had him very narrowly ahead of Kaus and Smokes, this more meant he is ahead, but I don't think it moved him any higher than that. So now I'd like to get to Akiyama. So here's the case for Akiyama. He has now made 4 finals, and he has a championship. He's not, not a winner. He ties Great Sephiroth for 7th, 8th most finals all time, despite not having played near as long as most of the greats. He's played longer than Doc Evil, sure, but he's played less time than anyone ahead of him in my rankings other than Doc Evil. He has played less than, I think, is still the case. He's made the finals in over a quarter of the tournaments he's played, which is the 8th highest rate for people who have played at least 2 finals. He's earned an icon in 40% of the tournaments he's played. 4 out of every 10 tournaments he has an icon for, which is also very high. Using achievement as a stat, I like achievement as a kind of quick roundup of all you've done. It values a championship at 1,000, a finals at 500 points, a semis at 250, and a quarterfinals at 125 points. He's at 15th all time, which is very high, especially considering he hasn't played that long. And per tournament, he's 13th all time. And if we exclude people who played like 3 tournaments and had some deep runs, he moves up to 6th all time of people who've played any length of time. So he is achieving more faster than almost anyone has. His current ELO rating is 2333, which is the 7th highest peak rating of all time, only behind people in the GOAT conversation and the Polish brothers. And who's to say it's not going to go up the next tournament, and that will pass the Polish brothers if he does, and moves him into one of the 5 highest peak ratings ever. And last but not least, he also, Peak Yojimbo is probably the highest peak anyone's ever had, and Slash, Akiyama, and Delial were the 3 players to beat Peak Yojimbo, and the 3 players to beat a 2500 plus player. Also Yojimbo when I briefly touched 2500, but Yojimbo was rated higher. This is not to credit myself. And so just beat very arguably the best at the peak of his career. You know, this is a whole lot for a player who has played 15 tournaments. So where was Akiyama in my top 100? I had him 20th all time. Since then, typos, but since then, he has upped his rating about 50 points. He's earned 2 more icons, including making a finals. And the fewer tournaments you have, the more new tournaments will change where you stand, right? If you've played 100 tournaments and add a bad tournament, like, who cares? There are 20 to 50, however many bad tournaments in there. It's not going to move things much. But if you've played 3 tournaments and have a bad tournament, that really swings all the percentages. So, 2 more icons is adding a lot and really changes him. So what I wanted to ask was, has Akiyama passed Cookie and Soujiro, who I had ranked 12th and 13th all time? And we may say this is jumping a bunch of people. I had Diacon N-Tite, I had Turds, Kaus, or Smokes, Vid also ahead of him. Maybe I had Chickeny ahead, I'm not sure on that one. So I'm skipping a lot of people, but I do think if we compare to Cookie and Soujiro, it becomes pretty clear, will become pretty clear pretty quickly, these are the players he should be being compared to right now. And if he continues to do what he's doing, he will certainly pass both. So I'm going to start by comparing some basic things, then get more specific. First up, we have championships. Cookie has the lead here, and for you, this may end the conversation. Cookie has 2 championships. In the 2004 to 2006 span, Cookie has a legitimate argument to be the greatest Triple Triad player of all time. When a 2008 article was written by Kaus Debonair, Cookie was one of the top 3 contenders for greatest of all time, in his opinion. It ended up going to Doc Evil, but there was a good case that Cookie was there. I think Kamikaze and Soujiro are the other players in that argument at the time for Triple Triad Advanced Presence. And you could have Cookie anywhere from 2nd to 4th, but Cookie is very much up there in the GOAT conversation. And he has those 2 championships. He's the 2nd player to reach 2 after Doc Evil. It feels like he has a greater place in the history of Triple Triad than the others. But I already had Soujiro a slot ahead of Cookie. As we'll get to more things, you'll see why I did. And but if championships are the name of the game for you, then yeah, Cookie gets it. But I think we're going to be able to show more. And I think all 3 have a legit case as being the best of the 3. So by achievement, again, this is the 1,000 points for a win, 500 for a finals, 250 for a semis, 125 for a quarters. You may disagree with those weights. I don't particularly think they're great. I just wanted a tennis-like system. But by that standard, Cookie is the lead, but Akiyama has passed Soujiro. And if we look by how much they earn per tournament, Cookie is almost half Soujiro, and Akiyama has a pretty decent lead. This is a pretty large lead. However, I do think these numbers are misleading, because achievement credits icons, and it is easier to earn icons the shorter the tournament it is. So Akiyama has far fewer wins per icon than Soujiro or Cookie. You know, the tournament Soujiro won was a 7-rounder. Akiyama's tournament win, a 5-rounder, right? Making it to round 3 is now an icon. In the old days, usually round 4, sometimes round 5 to earn an icon, which would now be the finals. So I think achievement per tournament played is a little misleading here. And I think total achievement is also probably a little misleading. Each point of achievement was harder for Cookie or Soujiro to earn. This is not to say these numbers say Akiyama is behind this group, because 191 per tournament played, even if you made some adjustments, it's hard to imagine it wouldn't still be like, you know, he might fall a touch behind Soujiro, but it's going to be pretty close. He'd fall behind in total achievement, but both played longer, you know. We'd expect him to be 3rd in total achievement. The fact that he currently comes out 2nd is very much to his credit. So I think obviously all 3 of these are incredible players, but these numbers are a little misleading. So let's try a new number, win percentage. By win percentage, Soujiro is somewhat in 1st, but Akiyama is pretty close, and Cookie is a bit behind. I think Cookie is more behind than it looks here, because 60% is 3 out of 5, and 68% is over 2 out of 3. But, so like, if you go even, you're 50%. If you win 2 to 1, you're 66.7%. 3 to 1 is 75%. And one thing you'll notice is the jump in percentage from 1 to 1 to 2 to 1 is bigger than the jump in percentage from 2 to 1 to 3 to 1, which is bigger than 3 to 1 to 4 to 1, etc. And so each percentage point away from 50%, I think, is worth more than the last. So Soujiro's lead of 3% on Akiyama might be more like 5 or 6% if they were both at 50%. And Akiyama's lead of 8% over Cookie is really quite big. If one of them was 50%, this might be the equivalent of being like 10 or 11% ahead. But I also think this one's a little misleading, because with shorter tournaments, Akiyama is facing the top people more rapidly. The brackets are less filled with beginning and newer players. This is true because we're not bringing in newer players anymore, anywhere near the same rate, obviously. But it is also true just because brackets were filled out by a lot of players who played a couple tournaments, clearly weren't, a tournament level player, which is very hard to be, and gave some easy wins, but there were enough they were playing each other and often making the second or third round, giving easier second or third rounds. And with the shorter tournaments clarify much faster, and I think there is harder opposition. Also, Cookie is really hurt by lengthening his career. And so, the longer he played, and we'll get to this shortly, but basically Cookie has this incredible peak, and then he's just a 50% player for a decade. And, those end up averaging out to around 60%. But this is not, a good encapsulation of Cookie. Cookie should be understood as these two spans, this 2004 to 2006 span, where he is incredible, and this 2006 span on, where he is a good but not special tournament player, picks up a few icons, grabs the semifinals in there, but is no longer the super dominant force he once was. And he shouldn't be penalized for that, right? It's perfectly fine to keep playing and not take it as seriously and just be pretty good. So I wanted to also just look at, what if we took out things like TTAC, we took out closed tournaments, we took out Rhinoa. We just did the ones that are basically always only open. And here, Akiyama really stands out, because most of Akiyama's losses have come in Rhinoa and closed tournament formats, which the others didn't play, and having somewhat worse results in TTAC as well, which is closed. In pure open, Akiyama is putting up win rates that, for players who played any number of tournaments, like more than Doc Evil, is just an unbelievably large win percentage, 78.1. And you can see he's well ahead of these two legends in win percentage. So again, I think win percentage has some flaws here, but Akiyama is certainly looking really good by win percentage too. So how should we actually compare the trio? Well, Akiyama's lifetime record is 32-15, and as we saw, it's better if we exclude tournaments like Rhinoa. Soujiro is 40-16, so a very similar sample size, a little better. Cookie is 63-42, which is hard to compare. You can see where the worst win percentage is, but also, just played so much longer. So I thought, what if we just take Cookie's first 17 tournaments, have him basically line up with the same number of tournaments the others have played, and also, I don't cherry pick it. I'm gonna include that he went out in the first round of his first two tournaments. I'm not gonna say, okay, his third tournament was his first good result, take 17 from there. Or take 16 if the 17th would be bad. No, just going to take his first 17 tournaments, have it basically line up in number of tournaments played, include the good, include the bad, it includes his incredibly dominant era, and see how he lines up. And then he comes out at 35-15, which is right smack dab in the middle of the other two's win percentages. And at this point, if we take these and compare their runs, they'll be very similar in tournaments played, they'll be similar in win rates, they'll be similar in achievement, and they look like really similar levels of dominance as players. And so we're doing that. This, of course, means I am not doing this is not giving Cookie credit for extending as a good player. And if you want to give significant credit for that, sure, that would put Cookie ahead. But I think when you're this dominant, adding a time where a player is 50% for a long time, it shouldn't hurt them. And 50% is hard to do in tournaments. 50% is a clearly above average tournament player. It is very easy to think if you're scoring like 40% in tournaments that you are way below average, but actually that's a pretty decent win rate and higher than most players. In part because if you look at any given tournament, half the people go out in round 1. So 50% of people are 0%. Another 25% of people go 1-1, right? 50% or worse is 75% of the field. Only 25% of the field in any tournament puts up a winning record. So it's really hard to have a winning record, and even being a 50% player is well above average. Okay. Here's their runs. And icons are colored. The runs doesn't include Rhinoas and other stuff, so Akiyama's is missing a few tournaments here. Cookies, it couldn't quite fit all of it, so there's a few tournaments at the end, but I got the main stuff. Soujiro took some time away, came back, made another finals, so that's missing from his chart. But here's just a quick chart that gives a peek, and if you want to, check out the tournaments they were good in, here's a nice way to do so. Soujiro also is TTAC 8, where he made the finals. Yeah, I thought this was a nice looking way to compare. So if you want to pause and stare at this, go for it. So how do these runs compare? If we just take these runs, Soujiro 71%, Cookie 70, Akiyama 68. So if we just take these kind of 15 to 17 tournaments they played to start their careers, Soujiro has the highest win percentage, followed by Cookie, followed by Akiyama. But they're all very close. And again, most of Akiyama's losses came in tournament formats that Soujiro and Cookie did not play. And tournament formats where I think it is harder to achieve on your own. Team Rhinoa's closed tournaments are going to have more variation. And if we excluded those, Akiyama would not just move from slightly behind to ahead, but to clearly ahead. By achievement, oh, that's a typo. I deleted the wrong page. So I set up two things. One for if Akiyama won Triad Wars, so I could record after our match, and one for if Akiyama lost. So this page has the win percentage from Akiyama losing, but the achievement for Akiyama winning, and the championships championships for Akiyama winning. So this is a typo, my bad. Akiyama should be at 2875 achievement for the run, which would still be the highest, but as we said, easier to get achievement in later years. And Cookie should be on 2 championships ahead of Akiyama and Soujiro on 1, but Akiyama and Soujiro are both on 7 icons ahead of Cookie's 5 during this run. This just looks so close to me. Like, the win percentages are really close. Akiyama's a little behind, but if you started weighting different tournaments differently, Akiyama might be clearly ahead. If you look at achievement, okay, again, I typoed this, but Akiyama is ahead. You do some adjustment, maybe he's a little behind, but it's really close. You look at championships, Cookie is the extra championship, but I gave him credit for that already in achievement, and the others have more icons during their best runs. So, I think this is dead close. Who to give the nod to? How would you rank them? We could say Cookie extended his career, I want to give credit for that extra time. That's fair, but I don't think the extra time should move him much. Maybe a little credit, but not enough to make a clear decision here. So what I decided to do was look at who were each players' best wins and who have they lost to. And if we see, some of the players have beaten a lot more elite players or have lost to a lot more weaker players, we might be able to conclude something like, okay, their opposition was a lot tougher, or their opposition was weaker, or this player was more consistent. So I think what we generally want to see here is wins against other elite players. And actually, I think what we want to see is losses against other elite players rather than losses against weaker players, which you'd think the best players should mostly avoid, though no one has completely avoided. Except Doc Evil, but short run. So let's look at, here are each player's, all their losses over this run, and the opponent's world rank at the time they lost them. Approximate, I used an approximation because my numbers aren't in quite a usable format for this. Oh, I typoed Mafijosi, that's a shame. So Cookie has a loss to Seto, who was ranked number 1 at the time. I don't have listed the years each one of these matches happened, but I took the person's general rank for that year. Lost to Kamikaze, lost to Koner, lost to Ulti, Mafiosi, Jaws, Aurora, Kefka, Tezuka, Mafiosi again, Vid, Zuinu-kun, who was ranked very highly that year, Biddy, who went on a crazy run the next year, I think, Cloud Strife, Virgil. I'll make a note of this later, but Virgil would go on to the next year win the next tournament he played, but he wasn't credited for that yet. Cloud Strife and Unearthly. Cloud Strife again. That's a really impressive set of losses. That's very few losses to weaker players. Basically only losing to really good to elite players. Incredibly impressive. What about Soujiro? Doc Evil and Seto, he's lost to more world number ones. Kamikaze was number 2, but possibly that was because Soujiro was ranked ahead of him, so Kazi was the highest ranked player Soujiro could play, given Sujiro's ranking of number 1. Not sure though. Depends on what year that happened. Great Sephiroth, Delial, only ranked 5 at the time, but obviously Delial is easily a number 1-2 level opponent. Virgil, you can see Virgil here at 5 rather than 49, because this was after Virgil won a tournament, or as Virgil was winning the tournament. Beast Day, the only player to beat Doc Evil, Soujiro beat. Kazakh, Kaus Debonair twice. Bryce, Keith Atkinson, Love and Peace, who is an early and successful player. Doomtrain, who we all know and love. Reeker and Mike. Doomtrain not yet ranked, but certainly would be at other times. Reeker as well. And the Mike one's weird, but again, what a strong field. Lastly, we go to Akiyama, and we have Yojimbo twice, Was Up twice, Nightwish, Kazdan twice, Foyer. Again, the sample's smaller. If we add the closed tournaments, we add Vid, Patriot, and Master Path. Yeah, I mean, 5 of these losses, 5 out of 8 losses, were to people ranked top 2. That's nuts. And I think there's a good case that that's the most impressive list of losses here. Now, a couple adjustments. I love adjusting things. All these players are incredible, right? Like, Cookie, has 15 or so losses there, and 4 of them are to players not ranked in the top 25. And this was at a very active time on the site. One of those 4, Virgil, should be ranked in the top 5. And then Sujiro's list, just as good. Maybe a bit tougher at the top, maybe a bit worse losses than Cookie's, but looks really similar in who he lost to. I think, again, just because of coming at a later era on the site, it becomes a little hard to compare because it's not a direct comparison of era. So with fewer players, it's easier for people to be in the top 50. I set a minimum rating to count as top 50, but that didn't actually affect anything because he never lost to anyone outside of that minimum rating except in closed, which, that's going to happen. And there's fewer losses because couldn't include the Rhinoas. That isn't direct head-to-head. In general, I think his loss list looks the best here. You can certainly look at the list yourself and, think, Yojimbo and Was Up are terrible, while Kamikaze is excellent, which is, fair. Yeah, conclude that. And you can look at the list and draw your own conclusions. But I would say it looks to me like Akiyama has been the most consistent of these players. Has given up the fewest losses to players he shouldn't lose to. And there's the caveat, he hasn't maintained it as long. It might not be as much better as it looks, but I think it is better. I think this makes Akiyama look better than the others. What about we look at the wins? Because maybe we don't care so much about losses. Who have you beaten? Cookie. Kaus Debonair, 6th. Bren, 7th. Kamikaze, 8th. Dream Virus. Kaus again. Bloody Abyss. Gafgarian. Slawio. Omega Weapon. Jaws. And Dalamar. All very strong players, especially at the time. You'll notice, though, there's no wins against the top 5. And okay, that's a somewhat arbitrary cutoff, but Cookie had some losses to top 5 players at the time. And I think it's interesting, none of his runs had him beating who at the time, at least my ratings, think were the very best of the best. He doesn't have wins. He has a win against Kamikaze, but it's before Kamikaze ran up results, but maybe that should count. But no wins against Soujiro, Doc Evil, Ulti. There's a couple others. It seems a little weaker of a list as we move to the next one. Obviously, excellent list. But the next one, Soujiro, beat Kamikaze. Again, Kamikaze would have been number 1 if Soujiro was not ranked higher at the time. Karmazin, the only player to ever beat Karmazin in a tournament. Koner, Seto, Ulti, Jadat, Turds, Jaws, Smokes, Piggyman, Polo, Keith Atkinson. What I like about this list is not only is it incredibly strong at the top, but it hits a whole bunch of arrows. Because Kamikaze, Karmazin, and Ulti, and when he played Seto and Jadat were early on, right? This is kind of 2006 or earlier. But Jaws was great 2006-7. Turds was a 2007-8 peak player. Sir Smokes was peaking, 2010-11. Piggyman peaking at the same era. This is a list that really, to me, spans eras in a really nice and impressive way. And I think is just a more impressive list anyway. Again, Cookie's is great, but I think Soujiro's is better. If we look at Akiyama's, he's the only one to beat a number 1, but again, Soujiro would have if he had not been number 1 himself. Lost to beat Yojimbo, Seto, Chickeny. That's an incredibly strong top 3 to have beaten. Slash of Time, Vid, Tezuka, Kazdan, he did get a win back there. Borchardt, Cool Spot, Acela, Cookie, and Cookie again. Note the wins against Cookie were in Cookie's 50% period. So again, this is a list maybe worth pausing and looking at and thinking, who would you find tough to beat here? Worth making some adjustments. If you see something like... what would be a good example? I guess on the last list. Like, you see something like Virgil at 48, that should tell you that this is before Virgil had his really good results, but you still might think that undervalues him, give more credit for Virgil, right? And if you look at this list and you see, like, Chickeny at 2, you might think, okay, maybe I don't think Chickeny was quite that strong. But it was at the end period of the site when there was a big 3 of Yojimbo, Chickeny, and Akiyama, and Chickeny at 2 is very plausible there. But again, you can make adjustments on your own. You can say Cookie at 20 probably is not worth quite that much. This was obviously not Cookie's time to shine. Cool Spot or Borchardt, very good players. Maybe you think they're a little, feel free to make your own adjustments here and decide which list you think is most impressive. But again, note Akiyama did this in less time, in fewer tournaments played that I'm counting for this, because I'm not including the closed tournaments for this. So anything to note? I think I probably said this, but I think Cookie's list looks the weakest. And I think with the players so close, Cookie having clearly weaker victories is a big part of the reason I think I have Cookie as the weakest of the 3. I feel like I'm attacking these players, and they're all just like huge legends of the game, and I'm arguing about 12th to 14th all time in a game that has had 100,000 plus accounts come through and almost 1,000 tournament players. 750 to 800, but let's call it almost 1,000 tournament players. These are all just like incredible feats from all of them. The question is, whose feats come out the best? And yeah, you can look at the players and come to your own verdict here. I hope I've made the case well that they're really close. Just really similar win percentage, really similar list of accomplishments, and comparable levels of opposition. So overall, last time I ranked Soujiro 12th, Cookie 13th, and Akiyama 20th. I think that we're rapidly approaching a world where Akiyama has surpassed Soujiro. If he maintains this and plays like 5 more tournaments, he'll just have bigger counting stats than Soujiro against probably tougher competition, and I think it'll be hard to argue that Soujiro is still ahead if Akiyama can maintain this a little longer. But I think we're not quite there yet. I think Sujiro's list of players beaten is more impressive. Akiyama's list of players lost to is more impressive, but I think Soujiro is still just a tad ahead. So today I would rank Akiyama 13th all time, which is up 7 slots, which I think is a huge jump when you're in this territory. It is very hard, without winning a tournament, when you're in kind of that top 20 range, to move up that many slots, because there's so few people left to pass. Your views may differ, but I think you could think Akiyama has passed Soujiro already. That would be legitimate. I don't think he can have passed anyone else yet. Slash, with his 3 tournament wins, MC and Nightwish's crazy win rates, high ratings, Kamikaze and Koner's 2 wins, and just so many icons for each, such length of achievement. I think you can't have Akiyama higher than 12th for the moment. and to really get in that conversation with the next people. Either a tournament win, a couple more finals, or just like what Koner did, just quarterfinal and semifinal after quarterfinal and semifinal, just earning so many of them. Like, something like that would have to happen, and that's probably going to take a bit unless he just wins the next 2 tournaments. So I don't think it would be reasonable to have Akiyama higher than 12th. Again, this is based purely on tournament achievement, and if you want to say you think he's a better player than the others, or that they're better players than he is, that's completely fair. I'm just doing this based on what people have earned in tournaments. Like, if we did the most talented players ever, I would think Doc Evil, Nimloth, Karmazin, Delial, Seto. Like, I feel like that's the top 5. And that's not the same as in some order. I don't think that's necessarily the order. But, that's a very different list than my all-time tournament rankings, right? But I think for tournament rankings, I don't think he can be higher than 12. Now, if you think I've ranked him too high and want him, behind Soujiro and Cookie and want to drop him behind others, then you could argue for players like Vid Turds, Cow Smokes D, maybe Karmazin, but that's the lowest you could go. And also, I think that's just clearly wrong at this point. His achievement numbers, just his wins, who he's beaten, who he's lost to. He looks like, from what we have, just a clearly even stronger player, as strong as that 5 is. He looks like he's a stronger player and has done more and has done it faster. So I think 13th is right, and I guess that's what I'm arguing here. I think if I was redoing my list today, I would have the same GOAT contenders. I don't think anything's really changed there. I guess I've helped my case. Like, if you thought I was the bottom of the GOAT contenders, maybe I've moved up. If you thought I was towards the top of the GOAT contenders, maybe I've solidified. But, the GOAT contenders are all close and have different arguments, and I think me winning a 7th tournament would change things, but me hitting 6, I don't think is that big a deal. So we still have the same top 5. We still have Great Sephiroth in 6. We still have Slash, the Polish Brothers, Kamikaze, and Koner. But now I think instead of kind of Soujiro being, I think, clear 12th, I think he's ahead of Cookie. But Cookie maybe is closer than I gave credit for when I was doing those rankings. But Soujiro 12th, Cookie 13th. I think Akiyama has wedged himself in there, and that you should rank him somewhere between 12th and 14th at this point in time. Not that anyone else is as invested in these rankings as I am, but that's where I stand on Akiyama. Having just almost lost to him in a match where I thought he outplayed me most of the games, for whatever that's worth. So that's my verdict. This is my kind of update to the rankings. Let me know if you like kind of ranking updates, seeing where people stand. I always feel like when you're comparing people's cases, you treat it as, oh, this one's weak and this one's strong. And instead it's like, these are all incredibly strong and this one's even stronger. Like, if we're arguing between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, and someone starts going, yeah, LeBron sucks at this, this, and this, like, A, they're wrong, he doesn't. But B, like, that feels like it misses the point. They're both unbelievable, and maybe one is even better, right? Also, Kareem, I think clear 3rd best player of all time, but, like, you could argue he's in that top group should include Kareem. Anywho, so hopefully this was kind of celebratory enough. I think these 3 are really close, and you should have them next to each other. That's my argument. I'd be curious if someone else made like a top 100, just what it would look like, how different it would be. Especially if they use kind of different criteria, like if they did go for a talent-based thing, I'd be really curious. I don't know who would be the person to make it, because I think a lot of the people who have a better sense of kind of strength of play over time and playing a long time are not at all interested in making rankings. Maybe Metis would be a good person. I don't know. Would be curious. I guess we'll call it there. Yeah.